So next up we have Charity Harvey, and her presentation is called Art, the Power to Change the World.
Hello, my name is Charity Harvey. I'm the owner of Essential Dance Studio in Bayview. It's Milwaukee's only pole art studio. I'm the creator of a space where we are focused on peace, personal health, and emotional well-being. The dance uses traditional and philosophical practices of yoga with the graceful contemporary postures of ballet, merged together with the fluid motion and strength of the pole. I want to take some of the energy and curiosity surrounding pole dancing and shift it to a healthier focus, to pole art. When I was researching this PechaKucha thing, I came across one story that argued our biggest flaw is also our greatest strength. And I think in my case, that's true. It's also the meaning of my name, which I've found bitterly ironic in the past. You see, it would be my heart, my desire to love and be loved. Charity is long-suffering. But my story today is about art and how it has the power to change the world. I grew up in Grand Island, Nebraska. My dad was a carpenter, and I'd been his little gopher since I was big enough to go fetch whatever tool he needed. And there were no artists in Nebraska. There were a lot of farmers, fields, and cattle, a lot of hard work and blood and sweat kind of ethics. Now, there are probably some artists, there are some bums and plenty of hooligans, but in Nebraska, my American dream looked like calloused hands and a thick tan, and I never really dreamt. When I was a baby, they found that my mother had breast cancer. And because she was breastfeeding me, it spread like wildfire, as my dad would say. She died 6 months later. I was a year old. My father raised me and my sister as a single parent. He always told me that marriage was made of two great forgivers, and to know when to pick your battles and when to let it go. He and my mother, like my oldest brother and his wife, met each other in high school and married shortly after. So I aspired to do that as well. I didn't want to kiss anyone but my husband. I wanted to be the best wife and mother, to stay at home and school our kids like my sister-in-law had done. Everything was laid out in how to be a good woman line. But my first kiss was stolen from me in a dark kitchen by a boy who hadn't even held my hand yet. And my first love, well, I'd shot too high and fallen. I was picked up by the sort of boy who seemed really nice. He was quick to laugh at others. He was very sensitive. He cried often. When he was in trouble or didn't want me to leave him or go out with my friends. And his anger was just as childish and uncontrollable. And my dad didn't know what to do with me when I'd come home after curfew with bloodshot eyes and explain that I had been fighting again. I'd forgive him when he'd call me a bitch and tell me to shut up and hit things. And I'd forgive him when he'd lie. My dad would say, the boy he is now isn't the man he will be. But when I'd picture the man he'd become, I'd cringe inside. But I would love him anyway. He was my first, and I couldn't bear to tell my future husband that I'd given myself to another. By the time I was 15, I was pregnant, and by 16, he'd done something so unforgivable that now I'd chosen to be a single mother. My father's first words when I told him I was pregnant was, "I'm not your babysitter," followed by, "You made this bed, and that's not how I raised you." It grew in me an independent determination that would fuel me through the darkest nights to do whatever I had to do, to prove that I had not failed, that I would do it on my own, without any handouts and without being a burden on anyone. There was no art in my life, only solid determination to pay for my mistakes. It was 6 more years before I met an artist. I had unknowingly invited him to my home after church. You see, it was Christmas break, and I had made a huge meal with 2 different desserts, and then been stood up again. So I invited 6 people over after church, and yeah, I still had leftovers. When I first saw him, I nudged my friend and said, "Hey, look at that guy. He looks like Jesus. He's kind of cute." At first, he told me he was a carpenter, which was probably good. If I had known he was an artist, I might not have asked him to our first not date, which I told him I was going to shave off all my hair. And he said, "Cool, why?" I said, "Because I've wanted to for over 2 years now. I'm really sick and tired of just being used for sex. I've had enough of it. If they don't care who I am as a person, then fuck them. I don't want them as shitty friends anyway. And the next time he saw me, I had shaved my head. And this was the beginning of a beautiful relationship. To me, art had always been what you do when the pain inside was so intense and so concentrated that it had to find a way out, so there would still be room left to breathe. To him, art was what he breathed, not a dream. Art was possible, made to reveal the impossible. Art was the future, not the past. Art was the answer to everything. Money wasn't an issue, not because he had any, just because he believed that money would follow if he pursued his dreams. And man, could this guy dream? Nothing stood in his way. If you could see it in your mind, you could write it in a book, you can draw it in a picture, you can sculpt it. If you could write it in a plan, then why not? It's one stone on top of the other. I scoffed and said, you need to come back down here, but he lifted me up. Why couldn't it be real? It took me a long time to really believe, to let myself dream, but he took my hand and asked me to imagine. What would you make if you could make anything? What would it look like? I imagined a beautiful place, a place of peace, to dance and express yourself, to be free, a place that nourished you and strengthened you from the inside out, a place that made you better just for being a part of it, a place of community and passion. Really, he didn't ask me to make art. He didn't put a brush in my hand. He asked me to believe. And not just to believe that I wouldn't fail, but to believe that I could make anything. If you could make anything, what would that look
Thank you, Charity. That was an amazing story.